Hey friends, this is Pop Culture Makes Me Jealous, where we discuss pop culture through the lens of race or gender, and sometimes both. I'm your host, Julia Washington, and on today's show, we are discussing A Muppets Christmas Carol. Muppets Christmas Carol was first released in December of 1992, which actually is one of my favorite points of time in history. And we're not going to talk about that today, but I just need to make that known. And stars the Muppets and Michael Caine. But before we dive in, let me introduce you to my guest. Samantha Crockett lives on the south side of Chicago with her husband and young daughter. She loves headbands, cardigans, and graphic tees about as much as she loves banana pudding, local food, and quirky TV procedurals. And I'm going to add, we talk a lot about books in the DMs too. So, I'm just going to add that we also talk a lot about books.
Yes.
I'm so excited she's here because I've met her through Tracy Stinger, who's a former guest, and through her coffee house table. I never remember the order. I'm so sorry, Tracy. And yeah, we've just been chatting in the DMs ever since. So welcome to the show,
Yep.
Samantha.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I am really excited about it. I am a huge Disney fan, and so I was really excited about this season and really excited about all of it. And I think it's funny because I feel like I've always been alive when the Muppets were really a part of Disney, like to the point where when I think of, even though I know for all intents it was a separate company at one point,
Yeah.
When I think of MGM, Hollywood Studios, it'll always be MGM. But when I think of Hollywood Studios at Disney World, one of the first places I always want to go is the Muppet 3D adventure. And when they were talking about taking that courtyard down, I was so sad.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for having me on to talk about what is truly one of my favorite movies of all time in many ways.
I love it. I'm excited. This isn't our first Muppets episode this season, so now I'm like, how many Muppets things can I squeeze in to season 5? Okay, so we're going to dive into the Google summary because if you're new around here, we always pull from Google because Google is what we go to first. Sorry, everybody else. Safari being, you ain't got it. Here we go. The Muppets perform the classic Dickens holiday tale with Kermit the Frog playing Bob Cratchit, the put-upon clerk of stingy Ebenezer Scrooge. Other Muppets, Miss Piggy, Gonzo, Fozzie Bear, and Sam the Eagle, weave in and out of the story while Scrooge receives visits from spirits of 3 Christmases, past, present, and future. They show him the error of his self-serving ways, but the miserable old man seems to be past any hope of redemption and happiness. At the time of its release, the New York Times had this to say, quote, "The Muppets Christmas Carol is not one of those clever children's films that keep adult escorts from gazing longingly at the exit signs. What you expect, Muppets, is pretty much what you get. There's no great show of wit or tunefulness here, and the ingenious cross-generational touches are fairly rare. But there is a lively kiddie version of the Dickens tale, one that very young viewers ought to understand." Which leaves this host to wonder, did we watch the same movie?
Yes. I also wonder if they watched the same movie because not only is it, I think I primarily ended up watching this movie year after year, not only because I loved it, because my dad loved it and my mom loved it. And we would just listen. I think we owned the soundtrack and we would just listen to the soundtrack. To me, this review, I just don't understand if it's do reviewers feel like they have to be cool and think about what will make them seem like the most astute or the
I'm
is it
so
the almost like the
intellectual.
classist for right, exactly, the
Mhm.
intellectual, because realistically this is just a fun movie. At every point there's a line that is there's cheeses for us Mises.
Right.
There's just so much joy and adorableness, and even the very beginning where they're trying to convince us that Gonzo is Charles Dickens, and he's like, I know it like the back of my hand, and then he proceeds to explain the back of his hand
Yeah.
instead of the story. There's just like all of these moments that I definitely did not, as a kid, see in the same way that I see
Mhm.
as an adult and still love it. And so I was truly surprised by this. Just like it was the person sad? Like, did they not have somebody fun to go? Like, what? It just is
Right.
such a sad, like, despairing view
Right.
of this movie.
Right.
Maybe they need the three Christmas spirits to come visit them.
Come visit them for sure. It reminds me of that scene in Ted Lasso where Roy hates Trent Krim and we don't know
Yeah,
why. And then finally in the third season, Roy pulls out a review of Trent that Trent did in his earlier season, I think in his freshman year of being a pro
yeah,
footballer, and reads it to him. And you're like, ouch. And Trent's like, listen, I was young. I was trying really hard to impress my people, blah, blah. And so then they have
yeah,
this really great moment. And I was like, I think that's literally every journalist everywhere trying so hard to show
yeah.
that they deserve that role. But
Right. Yeah, because I think, but I also like some of the reason why I love this movie, and I love this, and I love that moment in Ted Lasso is like we we almost, it seems like as a society and as a broad place, like the idea of that scathing review, or like making other people feel worse, or like taking the negative path, is like somehow what makes us feel like someone deserves it, or that they're really good at
yeah.
something, or that like it's
Yeah.
almost like if you are like a another good like joyful example that comes to mind is the woman who did all the reviews, and she like gave Olive Garden 5 stars, and she was
Yeah.
like, this is the best and I love it and it's so cute and all those things, and people were just like, ugh, Olive Garden. And I'm like, no, 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 let that woman be enthusiastic about the thing that she loves. And which is, I mean, my business is called Enthusiastic Neighbor, so I guess it's
Yeah.
not that much surprise that I'm an enthusiasm, preponderer. I don't even know if that's a word, but I like a preponderance of enthusiasm.
We're running with it. I like it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because I think that we do tend to feel like there can't be joy in things. We can't just love
Hmm.
things. There has to be a deeper, like that's not cool to like that thing. And I hate that. I hate that that's where we're
Yeah.
at, because it does make it so much harder to talk about some things, especially when you're not sure how people are going to react to it, or what it's going to be. And I think that for me, that moment is like, why are we at this place where Trent thought that that is what would impress people, and it
Right.
probably is what impressed people. Like, why is
Hmm.
taking such a negative, angry place what makes people respect us more? I think a lot of it has to do with traditional gender. Like
Hmm.
that idea of like, men are, you know, toxic masculinity, and men are tough, and like we don't have a lot of joy and all of these things, versus like how we could
Hmm.
see a more equitable, like, it's okay to be caring, and it's okay to have that zeal for life that is otherwise not always acceptable.
Yeah, and I also think too that there's another part of that as well where we feel like, oh, well, we have to criticize because that's how we grow. And it's like there's criticism and then there's just like there's constructive criticism and then there's just bitching to bitch about something. Like it's okay if you
Hmm.
don't like something. Not everything is for
Absolutely.
everybody, but if you're going to criticize something, let it be constructive. Like it's okay to say, you know what, this movie isn't for me, but your kids might like it.
Yeah. Or even, this movie isn't for me, but if you enjoy puns and ridiculous setups and puppets as famous literary characters,
Yeah.
you might like the movie.
Yeah,
Like if you're just
exactly.
looking for a good time, you
Yes.
might enjoy it. And that is, I think, one of the interesting things is I've started when I write book reviews.
Mhm.
Sometimes I will say that, like, I will give it 5 stars and say, I loved this book. I think
Mhm.
that I was the exact right demographic and I was the exact person. And I don't know if you're gonna love it. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know that it's the best written book I've ever read. I don't know that
Yeah.
it's like the plot is perfect. All I know is that I had an incredible emotional reaction to it, and this is how I feel about it. And I feel like sometimes critics also feel like they have to give their, which I don't know if it's wrong, but I think, like, in that constructive criticism versus, like, there's a difference between reviewing something for what it is and
Mhm.
reviewing how you personally feel about it.
Yep.
And so I think that that's a big piece of it is that, like, I choose to do it the other way where I
Mhm.
tell you because I just don't have the, like, expertise to, like, know things about some, but that I feel like sometimes when I write reviews, I'm just like, or when I read reviews like this, like we're saying, I just kind of want to be like, well, but that doesn't seem like the movie at all. Like, that seems like your very personal opinion about the fact that you kept staring at the exit sign when you had to watch it. But that's
Yeah.
not the experience other people had.
Well, we all know the Christmas Carol, whether we want it to or whether we want to or not. Like it is everywhere. There's multiple iterations. It is steeped in the gift giving season that is December. And therefore, we cannot escape it. So let's get like right at the top. Tell me about the first time you saw this movie and what you thought of it.
So in December of 1992, I was 6. And so I will be very honest that I do not remember the very first time that I saw this film.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you if I saw it in the theater, if I was like laying down on the floor of my house, but I can tell you that my memory is full of this movie. That, like, from all of my childhood memories of the holidays and of Christmas include this movie. And not just A Christmas Carol generally, A
But
Muppet Christmas
specifically,
Carol.
yeah, I
Specifically the
love
Muppets. Like,
that.
I remember, like I said, I remember watching it. It was always, we would watch it with my parents. I would watch it by myself. Like I said, we had the soundtrack where we would just like listen to the music because it's so good. Some of the songs today, like when I was thinking about what movie I wanted to talk about, one of the reasons why I wanted to pick this one to talk about is because some of these songs are still on my everyday playlist. I wake up in the morning and one of the very first songs on my like morning playlist is Thankful Heart, which is the song at the end of the
Oh,
movie where he like talks
yeah.
about living every day in this wonderful way. And so for me, it's this reminder of we can wake up every day and say, this is how I want to live. I just want to love everybody. I just want to be grateful for the
Yeah.
day that I have ahead of me. And so, like, it's still on my playlist. Um, but I also remember that it's just so much fun. And it's just so
Mhm.
funny. And like some of the things that, like, on the regular, I will still think about those tiny rats in
Yeah.
their hula skirts and like, this is my island in the sun, when they want more stuff. I did some reading of the like trivia on IMDb before
Mhm.
I came to talk about this, and my one of the ones I think is so funny is how much work it seems that Brian Henson did in order to get When Love Is Gone put back into this movie. And I'm just like, why, Brian Henson? I fast forwarded it through it every time. I don't think I listened to it a single time. I would, on the VHS, I would have the VHS and I would just fast forward through it because
Yeah.
I song. I just don't think it fits. It's not that it's a bad song. It's
Right.
not it's so long, and it just cuts the movie in a way that doesn't make any sense. But that is one of my main memories, is hiding. The two big ones for me of the movie itself, like the huge ones, are hiding behind the couch for a very long time when Statler and Waldorf would come on to do the Marley and Marley song because it was
Yeah.
so scary. And then fast forwarding through When Love Is Gone because it's just boring.
When you brought up that When Love Is Gone, I remember yesterday when I was watching it, that is the point where I picked up my phone and started scrolling Instagram.
Yeah,
Like
it is.
a minute into the song, and I was like, okay, let's see. Do I have any messages?
Yep.
And then when it was done, I was like, and we're back. Like you, I
Yes.
also don't remember the first time I saw this movie. And like, I feel like it's one of those things when I think those of us that are in this particular subsect of our generation, because they were cranking out Muppets movies and Muppets content for a decent period of time. And then there was a big gap of time. And I'm trying to remember when that gap was. But I feel like it is just a part of our existence in a way that isn't necessarily true for my kids' generation.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I was also big into Muppet Babies, the original Muppet Babies, the
Right.
cartoon. Like I was Muppets were a big part of and also I think we're sort of later into it, but like for me it was also I was raised on Sesame Street, and so like that has all of the like
The
there it
natural
was just
transition.
like yeah, and I think some of it I don't know for sure. So I think that but I think some of it is because of the death of Jim Henson. Like I think that some of it was he had a lot going on because this was the first
Brian, right?
post Jim Henson, right? This was the first one that Brian was in charge of. And so
Yeah.
I think that some of it is about that transition and how it comes together and how pieces of that intersect around like where are things going now that this person who really didn't have any kind of transition, like he wasn't
There was
he
no
was
succession plan.
right, like well from my understanding he got sick but basically refused to talk about it and like refused to do anything about it and then just like died.
Oh,
Like there wasn't a huge
interesting.
it was yeah, and so I think or that he like talked about it just enough that there like wasn't it wasn't there wasn't some sort of like grand transition of
Sure.
like I'm
Yeah.
going to retire and go into the no, he wasn't ready. He was just he died. And so they had to figure out and I
What
think
to
he died in
do.
the middle of the sale. Like I don't think that the sale had been finalized when he died. I think that they had to like figure out what it meant now because they weren't sure about how they wanted to do stuff. Like it was just like this whole
I
it
remember
was
when
more of a mess.
Yeah, I remember when he died which is crazy because I was so young, but I was in the kitchen. I think I was getting a bowl of cereal because I wanted a snack, and somebody said no. And I said, well, I know where the cereal's kept and milk is at easy access too. And it was on Entertainment Tonight and they were talking about it. And I have a very clear memory of reaching for the cereal box and then Entertainment Tonight announcing that he had died. Like, so seared into my like there are shit I can't remember about my childhood, but that I remember, which is wild to think about. You've heard me mention that I am now a contributor to Jennifer Magazine, so I want to tell you a little bit about the publication. Jennifer Magazine supports a strong community of women and non-binary people who are challenging the status quo of ageism, choosing conscious consumption over status seeking, supporting brands that align with their values of inclusion, stepping into the empowerment found in self-expression, and talking about it. If you're tired of reading publications that seem to miss the mark when it comes to coverage of women, aging, and the gender binary, publications that are rooted in internalized racism and misogyny, then Jennifer Magazine is the publication for you. The publisher of Jennifer Magazine was once told that there's concern that Jennifer Magazine misses the mark, that it's not something people are asking for. And you know what? It's hard to ask for something when you don't know that something has been missing from your life. You can read Jennifer Magazine at jennifermag.com. There you can purchase monthly issues or even join their annual subscription and receive exclusive discounts. Do you get really excited that your favorite book was adapted for screen, only to watch it and feel completely let down? Are you a person who refuses to watch the screen adaptation because you know the movie gods got it wrong? I'm Julia Washington, host of Jelly Pop's Book Club, where we read book-to-screen adaptations and compare them to their screen counterparts. We've covered books like Normal People by Sally Rooney, Water for Elephants, and Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. We even host a live monthly book club where we have read books like The Other Black Girl, The Joy Luck Club, and The Sun is Also a Star. Sometimes we even discuss books we wish would be adapted, offer suggestions on what needs to stay, and who should be cast. So if you're someone who thinks, I can't believe they did this to this book, or screams at a screen about the changes that make no sense at all, then this might be the show for you. You can find Jelly Pop's book club on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or visit our website, popculturemakesmejealous.com. Roger Ebert. We all know him as our resident misogynist here on Pop Culture Makes Me Jealous. He gave this film 3 stars and called it a tale of gothic gloom, relieved only at the end by the warmth of holiday cheer. He also kind of criticizes the fact that Kermit and Miss Piggy's boy kids are frogs and all the girl kids are pigs. Also, I want to go back to the gothic gloom relieved by the warmth of holiday cheer, because like the Muppets spin on what is a pretty dark tale at its core, but also Roger Ebert. What do you think should happen? Because it's a dark tale that ends with holiday cheer. That is how I've always understood it.
Right. And additionally, I don't understand how it's the same book, because again, like we've talked about this and all other things, but like the movie literally, like really the opening, it's a song is the opening crescendo.
Yeah.
And then the jokes about Gonzo and Charles Dickens and like the back of his hand and them making a joke about that and like trying to convince, and all of these things were like, there's so many funny moments, like more than any other Christmas Carol that I've ever watched. Like
Right.
my other go-to Christmas Carol, I don't love the story. It's not like I'm obsessed with A Christmas Carol and so I like the Muppet version of it. No, I just like the other version I love is the one with Susan Lucci that was on Lifetime, which was like, it's the gender. Oh yeah, it's so good. I can't remember what it's called, but and it is just sad. Like the whole thing is just sad. It's a sad movie until you get to the end. Woo! It's a sad movie, but the Muppets don't play it that way. And I get it. I get it's sad. There are parts of it that are sad. I think that there's a lot to say about how we can look at it in a new, like in the context of, I think a lot of times in the past, I sort of look at it as like, even when we talk about it now, like Scrooge is just this like bad dude who has no cheer and blah, blah, blah. And I feel like it's such an interesting thing to think about it that way and think about it as a sad story, because what's actually really sad is looking through his life and finding how he got to where he is, and like then him taking sort of control. But that like throughout this version of the film, there's so much joy. There's even there's the song that I love. Like one of my like Christmas decorations one year was like one of the signs where you could put things on, and then it was how many sleeps until Christmas.
Aww.
Because after there's only one more sleep till Christmas. And so I think that part of this for me is like, yeah, you know what? It is a really sad story on the whole, and that plays into it, but also so much funny in a way that other Christmas carols just don't bring to the party.
There's a scene where Gonzo says, or maybe it was, anyway, it's between Gonzo and the other one. I forget the name. I'm so sorry. And like, they're like, Rizzo, thank you.
Rat.
There's a scene between there's a scene between Gonzo and Rizzo where Rizzo's like, gosh, this is like really scary. What's going on? And Gonzo's like, no, it's going to be fine. Don't worry, or whatever, the comfort low. And I'm watching it. I was like, was I scared in 1992 of this version? Because we have so many other things now in the year of 2023 and beyond that are just like way scarier that kids are watching these days that I really struggled to remember whether or not that this version ever made me feel scared.
Yes, and I can, like I said earlier, it did scare me as a 6-year-old. There are parts of it that were just like too much, even though now looking back, Marley and Marley is just funny. Like those two are just fun. The song is fun. Chains, like singing Chains are funny. It's funny now.
Yeah.
The other thing that I remember legitimately being scared of, which is when Gonzo and Rizzo leave, is the Spirit of Christmas Future.
Oh,
that, like,
yeah.
That's like that part where they're just like, yeah, this is a little too much for me. We're going to peace out.
Yeah.
It is very, very funny. But that he legitimately, which is another thing that I think is very interesting and that I really, really liked that this movie did, is that they did not put Muppets, like loved traditional Muppets, into those 3 roles.
Right.
I really loved that they said, we're not going to make Miss Piggy Christmas Past. We're not going to make Rolf the dog Christmas Future. We're going to create brand new characters that are these pieces.
Specific.
Because I do think, that really enhances the film in a way you don't often think, because of the stark difference between, there is a serious line that runs through the story that helps tell the story, and then there's sort of the like comic relief of the Muppets. And so I think it was a really nice decision for them to not put in where we would be thinking of the characters instead of the story.
Right. And I think I really love that it's sort of an entry point for the Charles Dickens story, because we don't write in the way that Charles Dickens did anymore, right? Like that's not our style anymore. We've evolved so much, just even in the last 5 years with writing styles have changed. And so what I think is really great about this film is that it kind of holds up in the sense of like, you could probably still show this to children and they would understand a Christmas story or
absolutely
a Christmas Carol. And then,
Indeed.
and then if you wanted to go to a more traditional play version or what have you, they'll be able to follow along and they can, know what the point is, whatever, all the things. So I really appreciate that the Muppets did sort of do this whole like, hey, we're taking this sort of kind of complicated story, because there's a lot of complicated emotions in a Christmas. I almost said a Christmas Story again.
I mean, both have pretty complicated emotions.
Yeah. But and then like, it's just so interesting how like you said, like the fun of it is missed by both of these reviewers, to the point where you're just like, no, I mean, yeah, if you're watching it with an 8-year-old, I think an 8-year-old's really going to get, I think 8 is the right age. Like 6, totally makes sense. But also I can understand why at 6 you'd be scared by certain scenes. But I feel like 8, 9, 10, I think it's perfect ages for this film to introduce storytelling, difficult, complicated emotions, all the things. And also Roger Ebert, who gives a shit if Kermit and Piggy's kids are all boy frogs and all girl pigs? Like, why are you thinking deeply about that?
Yes. And yes. And also the reason is partially because Robin, who is Tiny Tim, has always been a boy. Like, it's always been his, like, that is just who it is. So it was a way to like make it so you don't have to think about, you just have to think about it in the terms of the Muppets, and it's like perfectly reasonable. And I think that is one of the interesting things about this is that I read one of the pieces of trivia that I read a long time ago that I've always loved about this movie, that I wonder, now that we're talking about it, if that somewhat plays into it, is that Michael Caine said, if I do this movie, I need you to understand, I'm going to do this movie. Yes. I'm going to take it seriously, and it's humanly I am just going to act as Scrooge. I'm not going to like the nods to the Muppets aren't going to be there. I'm not going to like interact. Like, I am just going to play this role as if I were in like the most serious English production of this show. And the answer was like, yes, that is what we want. Like, that is what the point was. But it wasn't because they were taking it wasn't that they were trying to create a serious movie or a
Mhm.
serious Christmas Carol with Muppets. It's that this is what the Muppets do. Like the Muppets
Right.
are this very subversive, like satirical, funny, joyful thing that
Yeah.
like especially over the last few years or so, I think it's so funny the ways in which like somebody was the when COVID when the COVID vaccine was happening, the Sesame Street talked about getting vaccinated. It was
Mhm.
like, it's okay to get shot and all these things. And I remember seeing so many people being like, Sesame Street shouldn't be political. They shouldn't be talking about this. And I'm just like, you know, absolutely nothing about the history of the Muppets or of Sesame Street. Like Sesame
Right.
Street was created as a political reaction. I mean, not political and like political, but like as a reaction
Right.
to what's happening. It was created to give kids this like amazing space that they didn't have if they were just sitting down after school because they
Mhm.
were, parents couldn't be. And there are so many things over time that it's been like how it like they just dealt with so many things. And I think that that's one of the pieces about this movie that is this like the Muppets have never to me. The
Mhm.
Muppets have never tried to dumb things down to make kids understand them. It is
Right.
not about saying, let me shift all of this so that kids will enjoy it and understand it. It's saying, how can I both tell the story that needs to be told and get it to a place and make it enjoyable
Right.
to watch. And so
Yeah.
I think that that's a piece of this movie is that they didn't, which is part of why I love the fact that it's not like again with the three spirits, but also I love the fact that they made the choice to make Scrooge the grown up, like to make it Michael Caine, to
Right.
make it real human and not say like, oh well, you easily could have made either one of the or both of the like, the Statler and Waldorf. Like you could have made them because they're already these like crotchety human
Mhm.
angry. You could have made them Scrooge that would have fit within the Muppets, and then it would have been a totally different thing. And so I really like that this movie and why I don't understand the reviews is because the movie really is both this very dark tale
Mhm.
of this redemption and all the things, but it brings the humor and the joy in ways that don't detract from the
Right.
story, but
Right.
instead illuminate the humanity of it
Mhm.
really. Because even in we talked about like the one only one more sleep till Christmas, that's not about Scrooge. That's about how his staff is is making the most of a situation that they have to be in because of
Right.
the time and the ways in which there was so much Dickensian exploitation like
Mhm.
times. And so I think that the ultimately why this movie resonates for me so much is that like just sheer humanity of the way that they're able to bring the story
Yeah.
through how they did it.
Yeah, and I think in Roger Ebert's review, he even commented that, like, it should have been a Muppet that played Scrooge, and I was just like, "Absolutely not," because
No.
one of the things that I find always super magical about the Muppets is how they incorporate human, and I really
Yeah.
like the way they incorporate human. Like, it's
Yeah.
always in a way that sort of even though they're in a human world with A Christmas Carol, we're in a Muppet world, as opposed to like the
Yeah.
Muppets Take Manhattan or the Muppets Great Caper. Like they're going into a
Yep.
human world. Whereas this is now we're in a Muppet world, but
Yep.
it works. Like you need the
Yeah.
human element in the way that they did it. And I think if they had, like you said, it would have been a completely different movie if they had put a Muppet in that role. And I don't think it would have worked.
Yeah, it definitely I don't think it would have either. I think it needed
Mhm.
because the whole I think for me this is one of the like classic examples of you need the one person who is like Michael Caine, like you need the one person who is completely serious. You need the
Yeah.
straight, I mean, for comedy to work, you need the straight man. And I
Right.
think that if you were to have made, like in this movie, it is absolutely Scrooge. Like there is no other option. Like that is the for the 90%, 95% of the movie, he's the perfect foil for all
Yeah.
of this humorous stuff going on around him. And so I think if you would have made it a Muppet, it literally wouldn't have worked because there is no Muppet. Because even if like there's all this talk, like not all this talk, but like there's often the you know, like, well, is Kermit the straight man because he's, and I don't know if there's a better term for it than that. I
I don't
just know
know.
that
That's the term.
but it is
That's the
what
only
it
term
is.
I know. Yeah.
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 That like he's the one and all of this chaos happens around him, but it really doesn't. Like Kermit is actually very like inside of the mess
Yeah.
and the chaos and like the
Yeah.
arms flailing. And so I really do think that there are certain things that you just need the human in order
Mm-hmm.
to be that this is how we're going to make it happen and tell the
Yeah.
story in a way,
Yeah.
you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Um, Another thing that Ebert said that kind of made my eyes roll was how the kids in the theater didn't laugh and enjoy, or is how the kid, excuse me, is how the kids in the theater did laugh and enjoy the film, but likely didn't get it. They just enjoyed the Muppets. And again,
No.
Roger Ebert, no.
No. Nope. I I think that I I don't know. I don't have any, like, I just don't have anything else. I just know because the how could you there's no this the at at its very core, this movie is very clear that this guy goes from being a very angry, unhappy man
Mm-hmm.
to buying a turkey and throwing a huge bag of coins at a bunny that he had like thrown out an hour earlier. Like
Yeah.
there is no, like, even if they don't understand the vastness of A Christmas Carol and the ways in which we shift and grow and things happen and then we shift and we think about, like, even if we don't, you still understand the movie of this guy was angry and then he's not, and that's the main point of the film. So I just don't understand how you could think the kids didn't get it.
Right.
And actually, a really good trivia point of this is another trivia that I read, and I don't know how true that, like, it's IMDb trivia, so you never
Yeah.
know really
Yeah.
where it's coming from. But I thought it was so funny. I guess in one of the test screenings, and there's really no way to change it, or like they were watching with a, but that somebody, one of the kids asked why what the rats had done for them to get coal at the end because they had forgotten that Santa gives coal to the bad kids. So like
Right.
one of the kids was like, "What did these rats do that they only got coal?" And it's like, "Oh, they didn't do anything. They actually wanted coal because that's the fuel and like all those things." But like if kids, I think we don't give kids enough credit. That's
Agreed.
where I got to with this is I just don't think we give kids enough credit. I think
Yeah.
that they're just enjoying the Muppets or whatever, but like no, they get it. They can see the things, they see things that we don't as adults. Like
Right.
I'm sure if I was thinking about, you know, I think that ultimately the reason why this movie is so good is the exact antithesis of what the New York Times review is saying, and that I think this is a very intergenerational movie. I think that it is widely, vastly different depending on when you're watching it.
I want to talk about how different it is watching this movie as an adult from watching this movie when you were a kid.
I think for me, the major difference, and I sort of mentioned this a little earlier, but that I think that for me, one of the main things that I see, especially now over the last like 4 or 5 years, as I've like grown myself and lots of things,
Mm-hmm.
is that I do think that we give Scrooge as a society, like as a broad thing. Like he's always this like very negative character.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's just a bad guy. He's so angry. He's so everything. And that I think one of the big things for me that changed as I've started watching, is that that's not actually what the story is about. Like that the story
Mm.
isn't necessarily like, let's take this terrible human being and turn him into this like totally grateful guy. Like the movie is really about saying, this is where you started. This is who you were. This is how the world has changed you. This is how essentially 18x, London and its massive systemic inequality and all of the like terribleness has turned you into this guy who like can't see the joy that exists in life because
Mm-hmm.
of all of these things, and you can't see how these pieces come together. And so I think for me, I now watch it more as like, we all need those reminders. Like we all need those like we all need to have that space where we can say, why am I so cranky? Like, why am I
Yeah.
yelling at these rats about how it would feel on the unemployment line? Like, what are the pieces of how I got here, and how can I
Yeah.
think about how I can now change how I move forward? And that's, like I said, I have this song, the song at the end. Although my absolute favorite song in the whole movie is "It Feels Like Christmas" from the
Oh,
in the middle, like the Christmas present. Like that
yeah.
song is the one any time of year, that song will make me feel happy. But I listen to, Thankful Heart every day because, and I think this is why it works so well for me with the Muppets,
Mm-hmm.
is because there is so much of that joy and humor and love infused throughout it,
Mm-hmm.
where you can look at it and see that Scrooge was maybe just depressed. Like maybe he's just like
Yes.
all of this good stuff is happening around him and he just can't see it. And he
Mm-hmm.
these other, these pieces that like show him. And I think that there's a lot of like pressure, or not pressure, but there's like a lot of, I think even in this version, but slightly less,
Mm-hmm.
on the idea that the only reason that Scrooge changes is because he has seen what his future would be like. And
Right.
people, and the spider is buying his bed sheets and like all of these things. And I don't actually think that is what changes him. Like I think that being I think that is the because by the time he gets to that spirit, he's already talking about how he feels like he's a changed man and how he can
Yeah.
see how he's not. And so it's just like driving it even further home.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
think that like he sees all of these things that he's missing out on and that he could do something about, and that he's just it's almost like that like the bird's eye view, that like
Mm-hmm.
when you're not in the situation but you can see it in a different
Mm-hmm.
way.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a big difference for me about how I view it as an adult, is like looking at it from more of that, like it's not a dark story because he's such a bad guy.
Mm-hmm.
It's a dark story because this man is just lost. He's just
Yes.
lost,
Yeah.
and
I
we see that.
I totally, yep, absolutely. Because this time around, I was watching it and I was like, oh, this is a cautionary tale about capitalism
Yeah,
and how it ruins your life, especially
yeah,
at that point when they go back and he's like engaged and like they're happy. They are happy, and then it eventually erodes over time because he's so
yes,
determined in his career. And I'm not saying that love is the answer or that seeing his lost love is what made him turn, or that we need to
no,
turn to love to make everything better. But I think
right,
what hit for me was how easy it is to get lost in that I need this to be okay. And it has
yes,
nothing to do, it has everything to do with money and nothing to do with
yep,
like finding joy anywhere else. And
yep,
like, for example, when my book club read Paris Hilton's memoir, one of the things that I did was I watched her YouTube documentary, and in that she says, I just need to get to $1 billion and I'll feel okay. And that
yeah,
struck me so strangely because it's like, ma'am, I would just like to be, not that I'm saying, oh, we need to compare each other, but it's so interesting
Right.
how you have fallen into this trap of mentality that you feel that you need $1 billion in order to be financially
Yes.
solvent. Like,
Yes.
how did that lie get perpetuated?
Yes. And I think that is another piece of this movie that is a big part of it is that, as you know, you talked a little bit about Barbie earlier, and I talked a little bit about the like toxic masculinity piece of it, and like that is a huge part of this of this story, and of
Mhm.
the fact that like he even, and I think my 6-year-old has been now is like into Hamilton. She only watches the first act. She doesn't watch like, and
Yeah.
but she's 6, so it's not like, it's fine.
Yeah.
Um, but one of the things that strikes me every time I listen to that is that like the same thing that is happening with Scrooge and Belle happens with Eliza and Hamilton, because both
Yeah.
of them say, "I just want you to be here. I just want you to be present. I just want you to be my husband. I just want this." And both Scrooge and Hamilton are basically like, "No, that's not what a man does. Like I have to be able to provide. I have to be able to like keep you accustomed to the life that you're in." And both
Mhm.
of these women are just like, dude, I don't need that. Like, I don't need you. Like, I get I get my last name is Skylar, but that doesn't mean that I want a giant man. Like, I just want you.
Right.
And they can't
Right.
see it. And I think that a lot of the the and until we were having this conversation, like I had like pieces of it, but it sort of all came together that like
Yeah.
this really is kind of like the perfect like shedding the idea of that like toxic masculinity and toxic
Mhm.
capitalism, rather than solving the problem by like Scrooge is actively changing the way that he thinks about the world. But yeah, it's like so much of that like individualist like perpetual capital, like all of those things that shifts into this like, oh shit, wait a second, I have to care about people, I
Right.
have to have community, I have to, which is another reason why I think ultimately this movie speaks to me so much, because that is so much of what like my jam
The
is, like
work
that
that you
idea of like
do.
how do we, the
Yeah.
work that I do is like how do we get people to understand that it's not, it's important, like you were saying, it's important to be able to take care of yourself, it's important to not be a martyr. It's important to not like give everything and have nothing and like be completely, that's not the point.
Mhm.
But the point is, what is enough? What
Right.
is like how do we balance those things? And I think that this movie is a really good
Mhm.
tale to say some of it is just about recognizing that you do have to find that thankful heart. You do have to find the gratitude. You do have to find the ways in which these people are the people around us. He will give you his scarf.
Yeah.
And that the way to find this joy, and the way to
Mhm.
find joy is to have people around you and to have this community and to be caring for each other. And so I think that that's a huge difference as an adult versus a kid, because as a kid for me it was very much just like the traditional like, oh, Christmas Carol, he was good and now he's
Right.
bad and it's great, or even just like so much of the funny, like how like
Yeah.
I'm just gonna there's so many moments in this movie just like speak to me.
Which is such a huge message that a lot of businessmen did not get. But, like, this time around, it was just so much more meaningful for him to find community because I think that's what we're all craving. We're all so
Yeah.
disjointed and we're all trying so hard to find ways to be connected and find community. And it really feels like capitalism is trying really, really hard to make sure that we don't find community, especially right now with what's going on with all of the. And again, I'm not 100% sure if the writers actor strike will be over by the time this airs, but at the time of this recording, the actors and writers are on strike. The writers have been on strike for over 100 days and they're just asking for a fair cut. And then you have these, millionaire overlords who are like, no. And you're just like, but you're making money off their work. This is so exploitive. And I felt that in the beginning of Muppets Christmas Carol this time, where it's just like, no, you're working on Christmas Day. Like, why would we take a day off? That's dumb. And you're just like, sir, you need to stop, because this is exploitation. Like, whatever the holiday is, it doesn't even have to be Christmas. It could just be a Saturday. Like, just chill. Natalie and I talk about a lot. The patriarchy is really bad for men as well. And I think, to your point, this is
1,000%.
truly an excellent example of it being bad for men. I've been the woman sitting there being like, I just want time. Like, we'll figure everything else out. I want a relationship, not someone paying my bills.
Like, when we like play into these like very traditional like gender roles, it is so bad for everybody. Scrooge ultimately just needed somebody to talk to him. He just needed someone to say, hey, let's think about some of this stuff. Let's think about how you're moving through the world. Let's think about how you got to this place. Let's think about where it could go. Like, the three Christmas spirits are really just kind of like, like guides or coaches or whatever you want to call it. Like, and I think that that's one of the things that one of the reasons why maybe I see it, is because, again, like, if you turn it into this like current present day allegory, like, he's depressed, he talks to people and gets help, and he's able to move forward in a way that like allows him to be healthier and more in tune with community and society and all of these things. And so I think that, like, as we are more willing to have these conversations out loud and to talk about the reasons why we aren't talking to our parents and the reasons why we aren't doing these things, it's not that we're starting new trend. This movie is the story is 100 years old. Like, the fact that for so long we weren't able to have these conversations at the same level, even though it feels like this very old story. So many of the themes are still so relevant and so comes back, even in the ways. The very last thing I will say is, even in the ways that some of the, like, there's only 3 major women in this movie, and 2 of the 3 are portrayed in a not very and even you could say all 3 of them, even though it didn't get it perfect, it still was trying to be this anti-capitalism, anti-toxic, like, again, maybe it didn't even know that it was.
Right.
But it had this message that really. And the Muppets have always, they haven't always gotten it perfect, like a lot of the stuff, but they've always tried to move us forward.
Right.
The Muppets have never been about standing still or trying to move us. The Muppets have always been about, how do we make the world a better place?
Yeah.
When they haven't always, and we can only, and I think that's a lesson in and of itself for me, is like, we can't get it perfect. Perfect doesn't exist. We're always going to make mistakes. We're always going to look back in hindsight and say, oof, yep. Definitely wish I hadn't made that choice.
Right.
And we do what we can when we're in the moment. Because this movie sometimes makes it feel like he had this one day, and now the rest of his life is just going to be perfect and filled with community, going to make all the right choices. And he's not. He's absolutely not. Every single day, which is why I have the song on my playlist. Every single day, you have to wake up and make the choice to engage, and make the choice to have a thankful heart, and make the choice to be grateful. You can't wait. You can't expect that 3 people are going to talk to you every day about how you can make better choices or what happened. And so I think that the thing about this film that feels so important to me, a person who doesn't even really celebrate Christmas anymore, is that choice. That he makes the choice and wakes up every morning, presumably wakes up every morning saying, how can I smash the patriarchy?
Yeah. And it would be nice. Yeah. I think it's definitely got a lot of better messaging now that they didn't realize would be so beneficial to those of us in 2020. I want to thank Samantha again for joining me today. Muppets Christmas Carol is a great movie to watch, especially this time of year. And as most of us are truly trying so hard to do more than just survive, it's a great reminder that not only is the patriarchy bad for all, but so is capitalism. You can find Samantha on her Instagram, Enthusiastic Samantha. I've linked it in the show notes. You can learn all about her and the work that she does there. And if you have questions for her, you can reach out to her there. Pop Culture Makes Me Jealous is written and edited by me, your host. And if you're new around here, I am a biracial writer and podcast host based in California. When I'm not facilitating the Jelly Pops Book Club or recording this show or pouring candles or hand painting greeting cards, I'm trying to convince my dog to snuggle while suffering from existential dread. If you can't get enough of this show or you have something that you're dying to share with us about our topic, you can join us on Patreon. There you'll get one bonus episode a month, a bi-monthly happy social hour where we discuss current pop culture topics, and you get access to our back catalog of episodes that have in-episode bonus content. Some of those episodes that have in-episode bonus content you might be missing are episodes from season 3, 10 Things I Hate About You, She's All That, Can't Hardly Wait. So good. Just click the studio audience tier and you unlock all of that joy. The bi-monthly Happy Social Hour is virtual and is coming back in January 2024. I cannot believe December is almost over and 2024 is just around the corner. I hope this season has been kind to you and that you are surrounded by love and comfort and joy. And I really hope 2024 is kind to all of us. This probably will be our last episode of the year. We have so many more amazing episodes exploring Disney properties coming, all recorded over the summer of 2023, and I cannot wait to share them with you. Thanks for tuning in, y'all. Until next time.